So Incarna has been in development for a long time, on and off. We have a large number of projects ongoing at every given time at CCP. Sometimes there's only 2 people working on a project, sometimes there's 10, and sometimes we have 180 people working on a particular thing. Incarna is one of those things that started really slow with a very mild simmer, like back in 2006. Started looking at it. It was essentially after redoing the characters for Bloodlines. Once we'd done new character portraits for the Asian Bloodlines in Bloodlines, we kind of dusted off the character technology and it revived an old dream that we had of creating actual virtual spaces for the characters inside the stations. The first concept of it relied more on pure social interaction, relied on it as a venue for pure social interaction, as a meeting space to take a breather between doing things out in space. But it has evolved considerably since then as a platform for further gameplay. But gameplay which ties directly into what you do in space, or you do in industry, or you do other places in EVE, rather than a separate game on its own.
I think everyone will benefit from the Captain's Quarters. A lot of the decisions we made were with new players in mind. You know, we have to get new players into the game. There has to be more fresh meat to shoot at. So we made a lot of decisions. Some of the features in there are targeted towards new players to get them into EVE. We have a new corp finder, which helps match up players with corps. It's a more powerful search. It allows players to find corps more easily, find ideal matches for them. It allows corps to advertise more specifically for new players. It allows them to have multiple ads so they can say, hey, we're looking for miners, we're looking for people to help in PvP. That's the corp thing. Agent finder, that's good for everyone. Finding agents is difficult. The new agent finder will help new players and existing players. The main screen is something that we hope will appeal to multiple players. Some of the information that's on there will be lost on new players, but they'll be driven to find out what these things are. Existing players will be able to see this information, like the solve changes, and say, "Ooh, okay, cool, I didn't know that had happened." And that we're trying to get the functionality to appeal to both, which is no easy task, but we think we've achieved it.
The backstory setting for the Captain's Quarters, and this was much discussed, because the pod pilot has often been represented as this demigod, this incredibly rich, ultra-powerful, immortal person, and why do they live in such a small, crummy room? Now, first off, the pod pilot mostly lives in his pod. That's his natural environment. That's what he's used to being in. You're surrounded by the goo in this pod, and to be mentally jacked into his ship, and just with a single thought launching a salvo of missiles, destroying a battleship containing hundreds or thousands of people, and just that sense of control, that's natural to the pod pilot. So exiting his ship, going out of his ship and into the Captain's Quarters is a bit uncomfortable for him. It's a bit disgusting. It's kind of like Agent Smith hated the smell of people in the Matrix. It's not natural to him. It's a bit dirty, and it's not in control anymore. It's just a body. And so making the environment that he's in, especially these environments which are not like the environments that he owns, but environments that are dished out to him by the station owners, which the station owners are forced to dish out to him, making them a bit uncomfortable, a bit hostile, a bit cramped, was the natural way to go. Also, we have to remember that the pod pilots also span a very broad spectrum of richness and uberness. When you're like a newbie in your bantam or whatever, you're not this immaculate demigod. You're just someone who just got his license, and you have a crappy ship, and you have a couple of whiskey in your back pocket. But then you aspire to something larger.
From an art perspective, EVE has a definite feel to it. and we want to capture that feel with the world spaces. Our art director is very, very, what's a polite way of putting this, focused. He's very focused. He knows exactly the way Eve looks, and capturing that with interiors was never going to be really, really easy, because we see Eve from a very, very broad perspective. We only see the big side of Eve. We don't see these little intimate spaces. So there's a lot of concepting done while we were doing that. And one of the things we wanted to show was the scale of Eve. That's where the balcony comes from. Was Torfi's idea. The balcony, as you'll see when you play it, there's just a moment when you walk up there, especially if you've got a big ship at the end of the balcony, just sitting in there in your hangar. There's a real wow factor. It's like, wow, that's a big, awesome ship, and you don't stop getting that feeling. You want to do it more. You want, I wonder what that ship looks like when I have that in my hangar. And we'd like to think that might be a driving force for people to just go, "Ooh, I'm going to buy more ships and see what they look like," because they are pretty stunning when you see them from your character's perspective.
So having Incarna and allowing you to be like tweaking the iris of somebody's eye and tweaking his nose, and then changing his clothes, and then having an environment where the character is standing in, and then going to spaceship, and then going to like space station, and then going to planet, and then going to like universe view and looking at regions and conquering regions. I think that's unique about Eve is this tremendous spectrum of like size, like the power of 10. I mean, that's one of the things that you get fascinated with when you start learning about astronomy, is how tiny an atom is and how large the universe is and how many solar systems there are, and going back and forth like that. And we wanted to promote that sense and like promote that feeling of I am in a very, and that's why the captain's quarters, and we've had a lot of discussions about it, is a fairly small room. It's very tiny. It actually started out more, the original concept was like a Japanese coffin hotel, one of these like tiny little beds, and then it got a little bigger and a little bigger, and there were endless debates. Oh, it's too big, it's too spacious, because it should feel cramped. There's like 5,000 stations in New Eden, and at every station you dock, they give you a captain's quarters to like rest. So it's not very personal. We're gonna have those later. The captain's quarters that we have is like a filthy motel room with a stained mattress. It's a DNA in it. It's not yours. But it should feel kind of filthy and not very comfortable and a bit icky. And then also small, and then you go on to the hangar, like Craig says, and you can get the sense, wow, okay, that's a much bigger space. Like, the reverb of the sound and the light and the flares, and it's all like building this emotion of it being big. And you undock from the station, and you see the magnificent large space station behind you, and you just realize how tiny you are. And going then back in and back out and back in and back out, and like flexing that power of 10 muscle, I think builds this great mental model in a player's mind of like the universe is huge and I can be a significant player in it, but I am still just a speck in the entire galaxy. I think the moment that we are seeing now, Incarna, the first version of Incarna going live on Tranquility, is very similar to when we first launched Spaceflight in beta, or in May in 2003. It was a very sparse, cold, but the tone environment. But the tone had been set, the feel and the look of it, but it was just full of potential. And over 8 years, we've been realizing that potential with all sorts of things that we actually couldn't have imagined back when we launched it. And so it's hard for me to predict exactly where we will be with Incarna in 10 years. But as I see it, we won't be referring to Incarna. They will just be part of Eve. Eve is just a game that you happen to. You're sometimes flying a starship, and sometimes you're inside the station. Sometimes you're looking at the surface of a planet. Remember, also with planetary interaction, that interface of like interacting with the surface of a planet, that's not just the interface for doing that industrial minigame that allows us to interface with the surface of a planet. So we have these different modes of interacting with the world. I don't think that in Incarna you're never going to be running down a corridor with like in bulky armor with a huge plasma rifle. We're not going to be doing FPS gameplay within Incarna. We will be doing gameplay where you can get killed.
Oh yeah, there has to be the element of danger.
And have other people killed.
Yeah. Well, Eve is all about danger and all about messing with other players. You know, we want to continue those Eve traditions into Avatar spaces, and you know we have to keep doing that.
The parts of gameplay that have proven most interesting and most fun and most long-lasting in space have been the parts where we have empowered players. We've given them tools to create their own plots and to create their own stories, and given them really complex sandbox tools to actually forge their own destinies. That's the design principles that we're trying to like take into Incarna. We're not mimicking other games or building linear experiences. Is to create a world rather than a roller coaster ride of an experience that you do over and over and over again.